It was 1 in the morning when my daughter collapsed right at my front door. Her face was bruised, her lips split open. Through tears, she confessed that her husband had hit her because of another woman. I held her tight, too stunned to speak, then helped her inside. Without saying a word, I went to my room, slipped into my police uniform, loaded my gun, and grabbed my phone. I called my lawyer. "Start the plan now," I told him. "You know, I'm glad you're here listening. If you're watching this story online, go ahead and hit like, subscribe, and drop a comment. Tell me where you're listening from. I really want to know how far this story of revenge has reached." Just before all this happened, I had turned off the TV and sunk into the couch, eyes half closed after a long, draining shift. Being a cop in this town isn't always life or death, but that day it felt close. I'd broken up a fight at a bar downtown, then stayed late writing up the report. My body was heavy, aching. I only wanted sleep. Outside, the night was loud. Dogs barked, motorcycles buzzed, kids tore down the street like it was the middle of the day. 1 in the morning, and still the neighborhood refused to rest. I figured the guys on the corner were out smoking and drinking beers, same as every night. I shut my eyes, trying to block out the noise. Then came a pounding knock at the door, so loud it jolted me upright. My heart jumped, instincts firing. Who the hell was knocking like that at this hour? I grabbed a chair on my way to the door, ready for anything. "Who is it?" I called, my voice unsteady, not from fear, but from a deep sense that something was terribly wrong. No answer. Just a couple of weaker knocks, and then a broken voice, trembling. "Mom, open up please." I froze. That was my daughter, Emily. My chest tightened as I unlocked the door. The moment it opened, she collapsed into my arms, shaking like a wounded bird. I held her close, her body so weak it felt like she might vanish right there. "Emily, what happened to you, baby?" My voice cracked as the porch light spilled across her face. I couldn't move. Her lip was busted, blood crusting at the corner. One eye was swollen, purple, barely open. She clutched her stomach with both hands, hiding the pain. "My husband, he hit me. Because of his mistress," she whispered before breaking down into heartbreaking sobs. Anger burned in me, but so did grief. My daughter, the girl I raised, the light of my life, stood there broken. I guided her inside, laid her gently on the couch, and rushed for a damp cloth and the first aid kit. "Stay still, honey, let me help," I said, though inside I was shaking. I wiped the blood from her lip, but every stroke cut into me. The wound was deep, not just a scratch. It was like it carried the pain of everything she'd been through. Emily kept clutching her stomach, her thin hands trembling. I carefully pulled them away and lifted her blouse. My God! My knees almost gave out. Her abdomen was covered in a massive bruise, black and purple, like she'd been beaten over and over with no mercy. My breath caught. I felt as if I'd taken every one of those blows myself. "Emily, who did this to you?" "It was Jason, wasn't it?" I asked, my voice tight with rage and heartbreak. She didn't answer. She just cried, her sobs filling the house with a sound I'll never forget. Without thinking twice, I grabbed the phone and dialed the number I knew by heart for the hospital's emergency room. "Dr. Patterson, please get ready. I'm bringing my daughter in," I said, rushing the words out. My car was still in the shop getting the brakes fixed, so I had no choice but to call a taxi. While we waited, I sat down beside Emily, pulling a blanket over her to keep her warm. Her phone, sitting on the table, wouldn't stop lighting up. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw 7 missed calls from Jason and a string of messages flashing across the lock screen. One read, "Open your mouth if you want to lose everything, damn why blood boiled." I reached for the phone, wanting to see more, to understand the full extent of what he'd done to her. But even in her weak state, Emily snatched it back in panic. "Mom, don't look. It's nothing." She stared at me with terrified eyes, as if even touching that phone would shatter what little strength she had left. I didn't push her. Instead, I squeezed her hand gently. "I'm here, honey. Nothing's going to happen to you." But inside, I knew it had already gone way too far. When the taxi finally pulled up, I helped Emily inside, holding her steady with one arm while awkwardly carrying a small bag with the other. On the ride to the hospital, she hunched forward, resting her head on my shoulder, whispering the same words over and over. "Forgive me, Mom. I didn't want to bother you this late, but I couldn't take it anymore. I had to run here. Each word pierced me like a knife. I was her mother. I'd sworn to protect her my whole life. And now here she was, in the middle of the night, broken by the man I once trusted. The cab pulled up in front of the hospital, the cold glow of the neon sign spelling emergency room washing over us. I helped Emily out. She could barely stand, her body trembling, one hand still clutched over her stomach as if holding in her last bit of strength. I squeezed her hand, hiding the way my own heart was racing. "I'm here. Don't be afraid," I whispered, though I was terrified myself. Dr. Patterson, the ER doctor on duty, was already waiting by the doors. She took one look at Emily, then at me, her face etched with worry. Without saying a word, she signaled for a nurse to bring Emily to an exam room. I followed behind, my legs heavy as stone. When the nurse slipped off Emily's thin jacket, I almost gasped. Her face was one thing, but now I saw the bruises on her shoulders and wrists, purple, reddish marks, cruel evidence of what she had endured. I stood frozen, gripping the edge of the nearest table, swallowing down the rage burning in my chest. "What did that bastard do to you?" I thought, though I couldn't bring myself to ask aloud. I was afraid that saying it would only make Emily cry harder. Dr. Patterson quietly recorded every injury, her expression dark. "We need an X-ray," she said firmly. "There's a chance she has fractured ribs." I just nodded, saying nothing, watching my daughter lie there with her eyes closed, like she was trying to slip away from reality itself. While waiting for the results, I went down to reception to fill out paperwork and put down a deposit. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. An unfamiliar number kept flashing on the screen, but I knew exactly who it was. At that hour, after Emily had shown up at my door, it could only be Jason. Fury surged through me, and I rejected the call without a second thought. He didn't deserve to speak to me. Not after this. When I got back to the room, Emily had finally drifted into a light sleep, exhaustion pulling her under. I pulled the blanket up around my hands, still shaking, and stared at her face. The Emily I remembered, the cheerful little girl who used to chase me around the yard shouting, "Mom, look at me," was gone. Her smile had been replaced by bruises and fear. I sat on the edge of the bed and watched her sleep, my heart breaking into pieces. I am her mother, I thought, and I had promised to protect her. I let her fall into the hands of a man like Jason, and I blamed myself for that. But somewhere under the shame and the guilt, a stubborn flame of determination started to burn. I couldn't let her keep suffering. Not ever again. After the staff put her on an 4 and said she was stable, I brought Emily home. I made her a glass of warm milk, set it on the bedside table, and eased the door closed, careful not to wake her. It was almost dawn. The pale light coming through the window was soft and mean at the same time. I stepped out on the porch to straighten things up and saw Mrs. Thompson across the street, sweeping her front walk. When she saw me, she hurried over, breath coming fast. "Did something happen at your house last night, Lauren?" she asked. "I heard knocking and crying." I took a deep breath and told her briefly that my daughter had been beaten by her husband, that he had kicked her out, and she'd come to my place in the middle of the night. Mrs. Thompson's jaw tightened. Her eyes flashed. "How dare he treat his wife like that?" she said. "That man has no shame." I nodded, said nothing more, but I felt like I had an ally. Then I remembered, Mrs. Thompson had a security camera at her front door. "Did your camera record anything last night?" I asked. She pulled out her phone, opened the app, and showed me the footage. There on the screen was Emily at my doorstep, knocking, weak and desperate, her small cries echoing through the night. My chest ached all over again, but I also knew that clip would be crucial evidence. I took Mrs. Thompson's hand and thanked her from the bottom of my soul. She squeezed my hand and said, quietly but firmly, "Don't forget, get justice for that girl. I trust you can do it." I went to the bedroom, opened the closet, and looked at my police uniform hung neat and ready. The blue shirt, the khaki pants, the duty belt, the holster, every piece seemed to be waiting for me. I touched the fabric, felt its roughness under my fingers, and put it on in silence. Button by button, I dressed like I was taking an oath. I am not just Emily's mother, I reminded myself. I am a police officer, and I will use everything I have to protect her. When I finished, I dialed Michael Grant, the family lawyer. His voice sounded sleepy on the other end. "Hello," he said. I was short and direct. "Michael, start the plan. Now." There was a pause, and then he asked, "Lauren, are you sure?" I didn't hesitate. Completely. Get ready. I hung up. I pulled my digital camera from a drawer, walked back to the bedroom, and gently moved the blanket off Emily. I photographed every injury, the split lip, the swollen eye, the bruise across her belly. Each flash felt like I was capturing not just the wounds on her skin, but the damage to her soul. When I was done, I sat at the kitchen table and spread out the printed photos, the hospital forms, and the USB drive with Mrs. Thompson's video. I plugged the drive into my laptop and backed everything up, careful and methodical, like I was building a case that would not be ignored. Sitting there, watching the laptop screen glow, I knew deep down there was no turning back. From that moment on, I wasn't just fighting for Emily, I was fighting for the justice I'd sworn to uphold. By the time I finished backing up the video from Mrs. Thompson's camera, the clock showed 8 a.m. Emily was still asleep, her face puffy, her lips cracked and dry, as if even in her dreams she couldn't escape the pain. I slipped into the kitchen and made a bowl of chicken soup, letting the smell of onions and herbs fill the house. I carried the tray to her room and gently woke her. She opened her tired eyes and blinked at the sight of me in my police uniform. "Mom," she whispered, then shook her head. "I'm not hungry." I sat on the edge of the bed, keeping my voice soft. "Sweetheart, if you want to be strong, if you want to heal, you've got to eat." Emily's eyes filled with tears, but she slowly took the spoon and forced herself to swallow. Watching her like that squeezed my heart. Just a few years ago, she had been radiant, always laughing, lighting up every corner of the house. Now she was just a shadow of the girl she used to be. The bruise on her stomach worried me too much to ignore, so I took her back to the hospital. Dr. Patterson met us in the ER, her face serious, though she kept her words few. She ordered a CT scan to rule out internal bleeding. While we waited, I sat in the waiting room with my laptop. I plugged in the USB drive and watched the footage again. 1:02 a.m., Emily pounding on my door, her muffled sobs caught by the microphone. My chest ached like it was happening all over again. Carefully, I copied the video to an external drive, locked it with a password, making sure every detail was secure. This wasn't just about protecting Emily. I was building an iron wall of evidence against Jason. Suddenly, Emily's phone buzzed on the chair beside me. The screen lit up. Jason Morales. My stomach dropped. I snatched the phone before Emily could react and powered it off. She looked at me, terrified. "Mom, if he finds out I talked, he won't leave me alone," she whispered, her voice trembling like just saying his name dragged her back into the darkness. I squeezed her hand, steadying her. "I'm here, baby. Nothing's going to happen to you." But I left it at that. Quietly, I checked the time, it was nearly 10. I pulled the SIM card out of her phone and replaced it with a spare one I had prepared. He wasn't going to track her, not again, not ever. A few minutes later, the CT results came back. Severe soft tissue contusions, but thank God, no internal bleeding. I exhaled, though the relief didn't last long. Her body would heal, yes, but the wounds in her soul, those would take so much longer. Back at home, I called Michael Grant, our lawyer. "I've got the medical records and the neighbor's video," I told him flat out. He scheduled a meeting at his office that afternoon to pull everything together. Not long after, Mrs. Thompson came over carrying a pot of steaming chicken broth. "This is for Emily," she said kindly, "so she can get her strength back. And if you need a witness, you can count on me." Her voice was warm, steady, and for the first time that day, I felt a bit stronger knowing I wasn't alone. That afternoon, Emily tried to nap, but nightmares kept jerking her awake. I sat at her side, stroking her hand, whispering comfort, but she mumbled in fear, half dreaming, half remembering. Jason pushed me, and Denise, she was in the corner, mocking me. When Emily told me about Denise, blood rushed to my head, I felt hot, dizzy with anger. "Who is Denise?" I asked, my voice trembling with rage. She answered in a small broken voice. Denise was Jason's mistress. She'd shown up at their house more than once, flaunting herself and pushing Jason until he took it out on Emily. Hearing that felt like a knife in my chest. I had eaten at the same table as Jason. I had believed he was decent, that he would take care of my daughter, and now I learned he was cheating and letting another woman humiliate her in her own home. I sat on the edge of the bed and took close-up pictures with my phone, bruises on Emily's wrists, the broken skin on her lip, making sure to include her watch in the frame so the time stamped the reality. Each photo was evidence, yes, but they also hammered home what I had to do next to keep her safe. That afternoon I took Emily to Michael Grant's office with a folder of everything I'd gathered. He spread it out on his desk, the photos, the medical report, the USB with Mrs. Thompson's video, and nodded slowly. "This is a solid start," he said. "If we can prove public adultery, there won't be anywhere for him to hide." I gripped my purse like a lifeline. I wasn't just a grieving mother anymore, I was a cop, and I would use every tool I had to make Jason answer for this. I didn't bring Emily back to my place that night. I didn't want Jason finding her. Instead, I left her with Mrs. Thompson, my neighbor. She opened her house without a second thought and promised to watch over her. I went home alone, pulled off my uniform, and threw on an old jacket and jeans so I'd look like any other person on the street. I checked the digital camera, battery, memory card, then climbed into my beat-up car. Every block I drove felt like stepping deeper into a war I had no choice but to fight. I parked down a dim alley by the Arch Bar on Main Street, the neon sign painting slices of the sidewalk in red and blue. I crouched low in the driver's seat with the camera, waiting. Around 8 that night, Jason's silver truck rolled down the block, headlights cutting the dark. I kept still, then switched the camera on. A few minutes later, a woman stepped out from the bar's entrance in a tight red dress, cigarette hanging from her fingers, confident and loud. I knew her right away, Olivia Parker, the woman Emily had described. Jason killed the engine, climbed out, and opened the door for Olivia like a proud man, looping his arm around her waist. Seeing them together, so comfortable and shameless, made my blood boil. He had sat at my table, called me by a name that sounded like family, and now he held another woman while my daughter lay bruised and hurting. I snapped photo after photo as they stood there in the neon light, each image another piece of the case I was building. When they left together, I followed at a distance to the Red Lantern Motel. The flickering red sign announced it from a block away, and took a couple more shots as they went inside, hand in hand. I circled around to the parking lot and snapped a clear photo of Jason's truck, making sure a nearby digital clock was in the frame. Each picture felt like pulling the trigger, evidence that would leave him nowhere to hide. When I got home, I opened my laptop and saved the photos into a password-protected folder. Then I called Michael, my lawyer, my voice steady with determination I couldn't disguise. "I've got them," I said. "Photos of him with her. Their faces, his license plate, everything." "Excellent, Lauren," Michael replied firmly. "Keep those safe. Don't let him know you've got them." I nodded, though he couldn't see me, and felt a small wave of relief. I was one step closer to justice. Just then my phone buzzed. It was Emily, calling from Mrs. Thompson's number. Her voice was thin, almost panicked. "Mom, he just called one of my friends asking where I am." When she told him she didn't know, he threatened her too. I'm so scared. Hearing her like that squeezed my chest tight. Even after escaping, Jason's shadow was still all over her. "Listen, sweetheart, stay calm," I told her. "Stay at Mrs. Thompson's house. I've got eyes on him." But inside, I knew I had to move faster, before he found another way to reach her. I immediately contacted Captain Rodriguez, a trusted colleague at the station. I handed him everything I had so far, the neighbor's video, Emily's medical records, the photos of Jason with Olivia. "I need you to put a patrol on the neighborhood, especially outside Mrs. Thompson's house," I told him, my tone hard. Rodriguez agreed without hesitation, though he gave me a warning. "Lauren, what you're doing is dangerous. But with this evidence, I believe you'll win." I thanked him, then gave him a backup copy of the infidelity photos, just in case something happened to me. That night I didn't sleep at all. I sat at the dining table, sorting files into neat stacks. The injury reports, the surveillance video, the photos of Jason and Olivia. Each folder felt like an indictment, one more step toward dragging the truth into daylight. But under it all, I couldn't shake the hurt. I had once thought of Jason like a son. I had trusted him with my daughter's life. Now he had not only betrayed her, he had dared to raise his hand against her, all for another woman. That pain cut deeper than I could stand every time I pictured Emily's bruises. The next morning, I took Emily to Dr. Hannah Collins, a psychologist Michael had recommended. Emily needed help to work through the trauma of the abuse she'd endured. Waited in the lobby, my chest heavy as I watched her walk in slowly, shoulders slumped. It was like watching a part of her soul collapse. Me, a strong mother, a tough cop, I hadn't been able to protect her. That guilt sliced me open again each time I remembered her swollen face. While I sat there, my phone buzzed. It was Anthony Delgado, head of the county property registry, someone I'd worked with before. His voice was urgent and low. "Lauren, I can't say much on the phone. But I just came across a land transfer file with your name and your daughter's on it. Something looks off. If you've got time, you should come down." My brow furrowed. Emily and I hadn't signed any property transfer paperwork. But something about his tone made me rise to my feet immediately. I told Dr. Collins I'd be back later to pick Emily up. I went down to the county property office and Anthony Delgado waved me into his office. He opened a file and frowned. "There's something off here," he said. "This parcel was transferred to Denise Salgado last week, but no one called me to confirm." My stomach dropped cold. "That can't be right," I choked out. "Emily and I never signed anything." Anthony slid the file across the desk. "The signatures are here," he said, "with your name and your daughter's, and the transaction is already recorded." My hands trembled as I looked at the shaky scrawl, "Nothing like ours." I asked who had brought the paperwork in. Anthony lowered his voice. "The clerk said your son-in-law, Robert, signed for it, claiming you'd asked him to handle things because you were busy." Rage rose hot in my chest. Jason hadn't just hurt Emily and cheated on her, he'd forged our names to steal the family land, the farm my father worked his whole life to keep. I kept my voice steady and asked Anthony for a copy. He sighed and warned me the wrong people might be involved inside the office. Before I left, he pulled me closer and whispered, "Lauren, be careful. Don't let anyone here know I tipped you off." I promised I wouldn't, and left feeling like I was walking on glass. Jason wasn't only violent, he was a schemer who'd do whatever it took to get what he wanted. That afternoon I picked Emily up from therapy. She seemed worn, but calmer, no longer in a constant state of panic. I drove straight to Michael Grant's office and handed him the photocopy of the forged deed. He studied it, tapped the desk with his fingers, and said flatly, "This is the final nail. Fraud plus the abuse, he won't slip away from this." Emily sat quiet beside me, tears filling her eyes. "Mom, he forged Grandpa's name to steal the land," she whispered, hurt and angry both. I squeezed her hand, hoping to give her some strength, while my own chest ached. That land wasn't just property. It was my father's sweat, our family history, and Jason had trampled it for his own gain. I took the copy and gave it to Captain Rodriguez that night. He looked over it, his face hard. "Your evidence is solid," he said. "I'll make sure he can't get away with this." I thanked him, but the weight in my chest didn't lift. Back home, I locked every document in the small safe in my bedroom. Midnight came and went. I couldn't sleep. I sat in the dark, replaying what Jason had done to Emily and to our family, the pain burning slow and steady, driving me forward. There was no turning back. I had to confront him. On Saturday morning I left Emily at Mrs. Thompson's. She was the safest place for her right now, and Captain Rodriguez already had someone watching outside. I changed into plain clothes, shoved a file of evidence into my bag, the photos of Emily's injuries, the neighbor's video, the hospital report, and the photocopy of the forged land deed, and drove my old car to Jason's business, Morales Pawn and Loan, the place where he flaunted his power in town. Every turn of the tires felt like a countdown. This wasn't some casual drive, it was an inevitable showdown. Morales Pawn and Loan smelled of oil and stale cigarette smoke when I pushed the door open. Two of Jason's goons were stacking items on the shelves and gave me that sideways look. One of them sneered, "Look who showed up, the mother-in-law." I ignored them and walked straight to the back office where Jason sat, counting money, stacks of bills scattered on the desk. He glanced up, smirked that fake smile, and jabbed, "What's up, police mother-in-law? Got nothing better to do than visit your son-in-law." His voice dripped with sarcasm, but I didn't rise to it. I hadn't come to trade barbs. I set the file on his desk, every page like an accusation, photos of Emily's bruises, Mrs. Thompson's video from my front door, the hospital report, and the photocopy of the forged transfer he dared to sign in our names. For a beat his face flickered, then he smoothed it into the same arrogant grin. "And what are these little papers going to do? I have better lawyers than you." I met his eyes, voice icy calm. "I didn't come here to argue. If you want to see who's right, see you in court." He jumped to his feet, furious, as if I'd slapped him. "Who's going to stand against me in this town?" he bellowed. I didn't flinch. I looked him dead in the face and said, I will. Don't think everyone's afraid of you. 2 guys at the door started to move toward me, but I slipped my hand into my jacket and showed my badge. They froze. Jason slammed his fist on the desk and spat. Your daughter deserved to be disciplined. That badge won't save her forever. My blood boiled at the words. He actually tried to justify the bruises, to make them sound like discipline. I wanted to scream, to grab him by the throat, but I kept my composure. I collected the file, slid it into my bag, and turned to leave. Before I stepped out, I looked back and said, let me be clear, the rules have changed. The law will be the one disciplining you from now on. He shouted after me, walk out that door and you stop being my mother-in-law, don't complain when I get nasty. I stopped, looked at him one last time and said, consider yourself divorced. Outside, dust whipped across the dirt road. I climbed into my car and called Michael. It's time to file, I told him. His voice was calm, cautious. All right, get ready. He's going to hit back hard. I nodded, feeling colder than I'd ever been, but ready. A few days after the pawnshop visit, rumors started to spread like wildfire. I went to the market early, trying to act normal, but whispers followed me. 2 women at a vegetable stall leaned in and said, in that small conspiratorial tone, that Emily was probably making it all up. My stomach clenched, but I kept walking, because this wasn't about gossip, it was about the truth, and I was going to make sure it came out. They say she talked back to her husband a lot, that's why he hit her. I walked past them and they fell silent, but their eyes followed me like I was the troublemaker. In the cafe next door, an old man sipped his coffee and shook his head. Lauren is using her badge to screw over her son-in-law, he muttered loud enough for me to hear. That felt like a dagger in my chest. These were the people who'd waved at me every morning, who'd smiled at Emily when she was a little girl, and now they so easily believed Jason's lies. I kept my head down and walked faster, fighting the sting of tears. At noon, Michael called me into his office. He set a stack of papers in front of me, voice low and serious. Jason just hired Hector Valdez, a lawyer from Mexico City. He's filed a counterclaim. He says Emily made everything up to extort him, and that you're abusing your authority as an officer. I looked at the lawsuit. Valdez's signature, in fresh blue ink, stared up at me. The words read like a blunt accusation against Emily and me, like we were the villains trying to ruin his life. Emily, sitting beside me, went pale. Mom, he wants to make me out to be a liar, she whispered, trembling. My heart clenched. My sweet girl now had to face not just the bruises on her body, but the smear of slander from the man she once loved. I squeezed her hand as hard as I could, trying to give her strength, while my own chest burned with hurt. I'd thought this town I was born and raised in would stand with us. Instead, it felt like the world was turning its back. That afternoon I walked Emily to Mrs. Thompson's house. As we cut through an alley, Jason's 2 henchmen were leaning there, smoking, staring at us. One tipped his chin and sneered. Be careful. Folks around here believe Jason more than you. I didn't answer. I just held Emily's hand and led her inside. Those words felt like stones hitting my heart, making me feel more alone than ever. I called Captain Rodriguez right away and told him about the threat. He promised to beef up night patrols, but his voice was worried. Lauren, be careful. That man's trying everything to flip this. I thanked him, but I knew the path I was on was dangerous. That night I stopped at the corner store for something to eat. The owner, someone I'd known for years, pulled me aside and whispered, Lauren, be careful. People are saying you made this up to take the land from your son-in-law. A chill ran down my spine. Neighbors I'd shared stories with now believed I was the schemer. I forced a smile and left, but inside the ground felt like it was caving in. When I got home, there was an unmarked envelope slid under my door. Inside was a note in jagged handwriting, shut up or you lose your daughter. My hands shook, but not from fear, from furious, burning anger. How dare he threaten my child? How dare the town be so easily swayed? I carefully put the note into the evidence folder. It would be another piece to expose him. Late that night I met Michael at his office. He read the note, nodded once, and said, Good. The dirtier he plays, the more he ties himself up. But public opinion is on his side. We need a hard, smart move to flip that. I left his office with the weight of what we had to do pressing down on me, and the cold resolve to do it. I felt a small spark of hope when Michael mentioned Denise. Maybe she could be the one to flip this whole thing. Denise, Jason's mistress, might hold the key. But I also knew it wouldn't be easy to turn her to our side. I sat in Michael's dim office, thinking about Emily, about the bruises on her body, and about the lies choking us. That slow, burning pain pushed me forward. I wasn't going to let Jason win, and I wasn't going to let his lies hide the truth. The next day, I learned Denise hung out at a little bar at the end of Harrison Street. That sounded like my one chance to change the game. I pulled on a baggy jacket and a hat, trying to blend in, and stepped into the bar. Country music was blasting, cigarette smoke hung in the air, and the smell of beer and whiskey mixed together. I picked a shadowed booth in the corner and kept my eyes on the door. I didn't want Jason's people to spot me before I could talk to Denise. Around 10, she walked in, short dress, bright red lips, a cocktail in hand, walking with a confidence that felt forced. I looked at her and felt anger and pity at the same time. Anger because she helped hurt my daughter, pity because she was clearly another pawn in Jason's game. I took a breath, walked over, and sat down across from her. Denise raised an eyebrow and asked, "Who are you?" I didn't answer at first. I slid an envelope across the table and waited while she opened it. Inside were copies of the forged land transfer, and a bank statement showing a pile of debts and the risk of foreclosure. I looked her straight in the eyes and said, "I'm Jason's mother-in-law. If you stay with him, you go down with him. But if you cooperate, you can walk away." She scoffed at first, then her face changed when she saw the papers. She went pale. The forged signature was obvious, and the red numbers on the bank statement said everything. I kept my voice steady. "Captain Rodriguez already knows. If this goes to trial, you'll be called to testify for fraud, and you could face serious time. Is that what you want?" Denise was quiet for a long time. Her hand shook around the glass. She drank it down like it was courage and finally said, voice raw, "Jason promised me a share of the land. He said I'd get it all. I thought he meant it. Now I see he used me." Hearing that, I felt a flicker of sympathy for her. She was fooled, too, but I didn't let that stop me. "You have one clean way out," I told her. "Tell the truth at trial. I'll make sure it counts." Right then the bar door opened and Jason's two goons walked in. They scanned the room and stopped when they saw me sitting with Denise. They moved toward our table, faces hard. Without flinching, I reached into my jacket and set my badge down on the table. "Want to try something?" I asked, calm. The low light hit the badge, and the two men backed off slowly, eyes full of hate but careful now. Olivia sat frozen, pale as chalk, clutching the edge of the table. I leaned toward her, my voice low but steady. "See? Jason can't protect you. He'll only drag you down with him." She bit her lip, torn between fear and resolve. At last, she gave a small nod. "Okay, I'll testify. But you have to promise I'll be safe." I didn't make big promises, only met her eyes and said, "If you do the right thing, I'll do everything I can." I stepped outside and called Captain Rodriguez immediately, explaining the situation. I asked him to secure an apartment on the edge of town where Olivia could hide until the trial. Walking down the cold, empty street afterward, the wind stinging my face, I felt a wave of relief. The tide had shifted. Jason had just lost his strongest piece on the board. The morning of the trial, I woke at 5 while the sky was still dark. In the kitchen, I simmered a light chicken broth, hoping its gentle aroma would soften the tension filling the house. I carried a tray to Emily's bed. She was still asleep, her face a little swollen, her lips dry. My chest tightened just looking at her. I woke her softly, whispering, "Eat something, sweetheart, you'll need strength today." She opened her eyes, weary, but nodded and sat up. I helped her slip into a long pale blue dress, then wrapped a thin scarf around her neck to cover the fading bruise. I brushed her hair back and murmured, "You don't have to hang your head anymore." Her eyes welled, but she didn't speak. She only squeezed my hand, clinging to it like her lifeline. Outside, Captain Rodriguez was waiting in a patrol car. He greeted me with a serious but warm nod. "I've arranged an escort, Lauren. Everything will be all right today." Relief touched me, knowing we weren't alone. On the drive to the courthouse, townspeople crowded the square, whispering. Some stared curiously, some gave small nods of support, others shook their heads in doubt. Jason's rumors were still thick in the air. Today wasn't only about him, it was about reclaiming the truth. At the courthouse steps, Jason was already there, dressed in a sharp suit, his face flushed, his eyes like knives. Beside him stood his attorney, Hector Valdez, calm on the surface but tense underneath. Off to the side stood Olivia, arms folded, gaze distant. Seeing her brought back that night in the bar when I convinced her to turn, and for a moment, hope flickered inside me. But I knew nothing today would come easy. I held Emily's hand and led her inside. The courtroom was packed, wooden benches creaking as neighbors settled in. In the back row, I spotted Mrs. Thompson. She caught my eye and nodded, her expression full of steady support. Then Judge Samuel Whitaker entered, and everyone rose. The air thickened. The only sound was the steady whir of the ceiling fan, like a heartbeat. Michael stood and began. His voice was deep, steady, confident. He presented our case piece by piece, the photos of Emily's injuries, Dr. Patterson's medical report, the video from Mrs. Thompson's camera capturing Emily's cries that early morning, and the copy of the forged land deed Anthony Delgado had handed over. When Michael projected the video onto the screen, the sound of Emily pounding on my door, her sobs breaking through the night, filled the room. The silence that followed was heavy, like the whole town was finally forced to hear the truth. I heard the murmurs ripple through the courtroom, some people even wiping tears from their eyes. I glanced at Emily beside me. Her hands were trembling, her head bowed low. I placed my hand gently on her shoulder, squeezing it as if to remind her I was there, that I would always be there. Then Hector Valdez rose to speak for Jason. His voice was sharp and cutting. Emily invented all of this to extort my client. And Lauren Parker abused her authority as a police officer to coerce and slander him. Those words felt like daggers in my chest. I wanted to leap up, to shout that he was lying, that Emily's bruises weren't some invention. But Michael gave me a look, urging me to stay calm. Instead, he presented Jason's threatening text messages, displayed on the big screen for everyone to see. "Shut up if you don't want to be replaced." The room went silent. Emily's head sank lower, her hands trembling harder, and I knew her mind was trapped back in those terrifying weeks. I pressed her shoulder again, trying to lend her some of my strength. Then it was Olivia's turn. She walked to the stand, nervous, her eyes flickering with hesitation. "Jason promised me a share of the land," she admitted, her voice shaky but clear. "He pressured me to accept the transfer papers, said it was all arranged. But the truth is, he forged his wife's signature to steal the property from her." Jason shot up, furious. "You betrayed me," he shouted, and the guards had to shove him back into his seat as Judge Whitaker's voice cracked like thunder. "Order, or you will be removed from this courtroom." Olivia lowered her head but kept speaking. Every word was like a hammer smashing through Jason's lies. Watching her, I felt a flicker of relief. Yes, she had been part of Emily's pain, but now she was standing on the side of truth. When my turn came, I walked to the witness stand and swore my oath. I faced the room, my voice steady. "I am a police officer, but today I am here as a mother. I will not let anyone, not even my son-in-law, destroy my daughter and mock the law." I turned and pointed directly at Jason, no fear in my eyes. "That man is not a husband. He is not a father. He is an abuser and a liar." The courtroom stirred with murmurs. I saw doubt cross the faces of some who had once believed Jason. In the back, Mrs. Thompson met my gaze and gave me a firm nod, as if to say I had spoken the truth at last. Finally, Judge Whitaker read the verdict. His voice was heavy and deliberate, though I barely registered every word. What mattered was clear. Emily was granted a protection order, Jason's assets were frozen, the land transfer was nullified, and the case was referred to the district attorney for charges of fraud and domestic violence. The courtroom erupted in whispers and gasps. Jason slumped into his chair, pale, drained of the swagger he once wore like armor. Hector Valdez stayed silent, quietly removing his glasses to wipe the sweat from his face. I took Emily's hand and guided her outside. The midday sun poured over the courthouse steps, and I heard people murmuring, "Lauren won. Justice won." But inside, I knew this victory didn't erase Emily's wounds. All I could hope was that, from this day forward, she might begin to find her smile again. The judge's ruling froze Jason's assets, nullified the fraudulent land transfer, and sent the case to the district attorney for charges of domestic violence and fraud. When I took Emily's hand and walked her out of the courthouse, The midday sun blazed down on the steps. I heard people whispering, "Lauren won. Justice won." But inside, I didn't feel like I'd won. I just felt a heavy weight slide off my shoulders, leaving behind scars that would never completely heal. That same afternoon, officers went to Morales Pawn and Loan to arrest Jason. The street filled with neighbors. Some whistled, others hurled insults straight at him. I wasn't there. But the next morning, the local paper printed his photo in handcuffs, prison uniform on, under the headline, "Pawn shop owner arrested for violence and land fraud." The sight didn't bring me joy. It felt more like release, like finally exhaling after holding my breath too long. But sadness soon followed. I had trusted him. I had believed he would protect my daughter. That betrayal, like a slow, constant burn, still lived inside me. Olivia vanished from town a few days after the trial. People whispered she'd gone to Dallas to look for work, to start over. I couldn't blame her. She had been part of Emily's pain, yes, but in the end, she'd chosen truth. Jason's two goons, the ones everyone called Los Chamucos, were arrested too, charged with witness tampering. The neighborhood suddenly felt calmer. No more hard stares. No more threats whispered from the shadows. But I knew the real wounds, the ones Jason left on Emily and me, wouldn't disappear so easily. Emily moved in with me for good. Those first nights were hard. She'd wake up drenched in sweat, crying out, "Mom, he's coming." I'd sit with her, hold her hand, whisper, "It's okay, honey. You're safe now." But watching her, I saw a reflection of myself years back, when I too had stayed silent about my own pain. So I made sure she saw Dr. Hannah Collins every week without fail. Hannah listened patiently, helping Emily face her nightmares one step at a time. And slowly, I saw her change. She stopped covering her face when she went outside. She stopped bowing her head when we walked through the market. One afternoon, I found her in the kitchen making enchiladas. As she folded tortillas, she started humming a tune. Hearing her sing, soft as the breeze, brought tears to my eyes. It had been so long since music filled our house. It felt like sunlight was finally coming back in. The town shifted too. Neighbors who once believed Jason's rumors began greeting us again. Some even came to apologize, regret in their voices. "Mrs. Parker, we didn't know the truth." I only nodded, without bitterness. I understood. Jason's lies had been convincing, and not everyone had the courage to stand up to a man like him. Mrs. Thompson came by with a tray of sweet bread and wrapped Emily in a hug. "You turned out even stronger than your mom in her day," she said. Seeing them laugh together warmed me, proof that kindness still lived in people, even after the darkest storms. I kept working my shifts at the station. Every patrol was a reminder of my duty. And every time I came across another case of abuse, my resolve grew stronger. I wanted to help more women break the silence. One afternoon, I spotted a young woman outside the station, eyes red, clutching her purse, crying. I walked toward her, my heart already knowing this was where her story of courage would have to begin. I sat down beside her and spoke softly. "You're not alone. My mother went through it. My daughter went through it. And I once stayed silent too. But I've learned that silence only feeds the monster." The young woman's tears kept falling, but in her eyes I saw the faintest spark of hope. I knew I couldn't take away her pain, but I could show her she wasn't invisible. Someone was there, ready to listen. Months later, Emily finally felt strong enough to go back to work. She landed a job at an accounting office downtown. That evening, she came home late, bursting through the door with a smile so bright it filled the whole room. "Mom, I got the job," she said. I jumped up, hugged her tight, and together we cried, not tears of pain this time, but tears of joy and freedom. Seeing her standing there, glowing like sunshine, I remembered the little girl who once chased me through the yard shouting, "Mom, look at me." The wounds on her heart hadn't disappeared, but she was learning to heal, to rebuild, to find herself again. That night, I sat on the porch as a cool breeze stirred the air. I thought back to the night Emily had collapsed at my doorstep, her face bruised, her voice trembling as she told me what Jason had done. I remembered the endless nights, the battles against lies, the moments when I felt crushed under the weight of the town's mistrust. And then I thought about Emily's smile that day and realized something. Justice may come slowly, but when it finally arrives, it can give you back your breath, your laughter, even your future. I sipped my coffee, now cold, but I felt a peace in my heart I hadn't known in years. Emily was back. And though I carried the scars of the past, I'd found a reason to keep fighting, not just for her, but for every woman still trapped in silence, waiting for someone to stand beside her. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you've been through something like this, share your story in the comments.